I'd really recommend reading Fire and Blood. It'll spoil the Dance of the Dragons, but it's in a very chronological order in that you can read 80% of the book and then you'll know exactly when to put it down.
I don't know if I want to read 80% of the book because I'll want to read the rest.
That's true. Did you get any of that Dunkin' Egg at all, or no time to
No
read it?
time to read this week.
I think you'll like it. It's good in its graphic novel format because it does a really good job of showing the heraldry because there's a lot of knights and stuff.
Right.
It does a better job than a book would do in describing them and showing them. It's really good. Plus, I mean, like reading back over it, a relatively not inconsequential story, but the A story is obviously Sir Duncan the Tall and young little Egg, his squire.
Right.
That's the main story. But the backdrop and what kind of like the purpose of these stories are and what it ends up doing is getting really deep over the course of 3 books. And in theory, there's many more to come, but he's getting old. But it gets into the whole Blackfyre Rebellion. I mean, right now I say Blackfyre Rebellion, and you might have like some vague knowledge that, somebody said something about that on the show one time.
That was a thing that happened once, yeah.
Yeah, but it really gets into it a lot, which is kind of cool. It in no way spoils who or what happens with the Dance of the Dragons. I don't think it's 100 years later, so it's far removed, many generations removed. So, just an addendum to me and Rob's conversation. I just wanted to make the point that if you have not read the Tales of Dunk and Egg, you're really, really missing out. Game of Thrones, I mean, obviously they spent so much time doing the live action version of the story. So it seems like that's kind of the story of A Song of Ice and Fire. But there's just so much more going on. Comparable to the way that J.R.R. Tolkien made all the stuff surrounding, unlike the Silmarillion, though, the pre-existing stuff that George R.R. Martin came up with, it's not just like a dry retelling, a dry recitation of facts. These are like really, really complex, wonderful stories. A small example, I think one of the most interesting and barely explored characters that popped up in Game of Thrones is the Three-Eyed Raven. He was played by Max von Sydow. That was really crap casting. As good of an actor as he is, legend, rest in peace. Crap casting. He looks nothing like the Three-Eyed Raven should have looked like or was described in the books. Who the Three-Eyed Raven was before he showed up in the Weirwood Grotto beyond the wall when Bran and Mira and Jojen Reed found him, he is a Targaryen. He's a person that served as the hand of the king. He's a person who basically ran the friggin' realm for a long time. The entire nation was in fear of Brynden Rivers. His story, how he came to power, the things he did, why people were scared of him, that's all covered in the first 3 Dunk and Egg books. There's supposed to be more coming out. Obviously, George R.R., he's getting old, and he has a really extensive queue of shit that needs to be done. So hopefully he gets to him. Hopefully he finishes the story, because the Tales of Dunk and Egg, they go so much further. There are many more books that need to be written, going all the way up to the time where Egg, which is short for Aegon, he is a Targaryen, he ends up becoming the king. He is called Aegon the Unlikely because he was the 4th son of a 4th son. Nobody thought he was going to be the king, which is why his dad grudgingly accepted the idea that his son was going to travel around with a hedge knight, unsupervised by anybody but that knight, travel around the kingdom getting into adventures. There's no way a royal prince would be allowed to do that, except he was so far down the line of succession that, what's the big friggin' deal? So they get into adventures, they have a great time. Eventually, someday, when the story is told, we will find out exactly what happened at Harrenhal, because there was a big conflagration. There was a huge fire. And the current extent of knowledge that we have, which is just a couple of lines that George R.R. wrote, is that Aegon was trying to bring back dragons and fucked up and ended up basically just burning Harrenhal. I mean, Harrenhal burns all the time. That's just, if you go to Harrenhal, you're going to die in a horrible fire. But there's more to the story. If George told the story, Sir Duncan the Tall, at that point in time, elevated to the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, isn't going to go out like a punk bitch because this kid who he's basically raised from a little boy. And because of that, because of the experiences of Duncan Egg, not growing up like a pampered little prince, Egg was something special. He was a good Targaryen king. So I don't think there's any way that Dunk and Egg went out like that. I think there's a hell of a lot more to the story, and I think it'll be fascinating if and when George gets around to writing it. So that's just my recommendation, my 2 cents.